Alon, thanks for coming. I love to
My
talk about
pleasure.
teaching, and I like to speak about teaching with you. I've been to several of your classes, and I think I hope that our conversation, as a result of it, there's something to share with others who are considering maybe a pivot or somehow in their strategy of teaching. But
Thank you for inviting me.
oh, you're welcome. I still feel like I'm on a search of how to get teaching right, and I know I'll never get it right. But I'm hoping that through conversations with other faculty that they might have ideas or concepts or things that you all do that make sense to others and might have an impact on the way they teach. So that's what I'm up to today. If that's is that okay with you?
I definitely agree that there's. I don't think there's a notion of doing teaching right. You can always do a little better, and that's what you're trying to do, is figuring out how to improve a little bit, to think about the mistakes you made and how could you have done a little better. And there's that element that every time you're teaching a different set of students, and the way to connect with them is a little different. So every time you're in a new classroom, you have to think about a little bit from scratch, as in like how I'm going to engage this group of people. And every class looks the same on day one, but they all look a little different on day 2 and day 3, right?
That's right.
They start differentiating from each other.
That's right. You said, how do you connect?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Connect is how to get them to engage you and the material seriously, right? So I think focus is really hard in this day and age where we're all playing on our iPhones and we're tempted to check our iPhones every 5 minutes. How to get them to leave everything outside of the classroom and be 100% engaged with the material and with you and with your colleagues. It's tough.
It's tough. So what do you do if that's tough? How do you address that challenge?
My feeling is I got to get them active. I got to get them involved. I got to, as quickly as I can in the beginning of the class, just get them talking to each other, talking to me, getting them involved with some activity. Because if I'm just talking on the board, their minds are going to wander, and I don't want their minds to wander. I want them focused on the issue at hand.
I'm going to challenge you on that. I hear quite regularly, well, I'd like to get them involved, but there's so much I have to say. There's so much material that I need to cover that I don't have time to really have them talking to one another.
I hear that quite a bit too. Like, I was involved with some discussions on how to revamp a different course in my own, and this issue keeps coming up, but I have too much material to stop. I need to keep lecturing, and I think that's the wrong way to think about teaching, because your point is not to speed through a bunch of material and maximize the amount of material you can speed through, right? Your point is teaching in a business school environment like this one. You really want to get the main points across, and you want to make sure that people understand the principles and the important elements, and understand it in a way that they don't forget it in 3 days, right? That they're going to remember it further into the future. Yeah. So if when you're designing your class, you're designing thinking about speed that you're going to go through the material, you're doing it wrong, in my opinion. So one thing that I think is very important is that I see junior people trying to think, I'm going to prepare for teaching, and they think I'm going to prepare a slide deck. They think that's kind of the same thing. Prepare for teaching is I'm going to prepare the slide deck I'm going to cover. And I think that's a huge mistake. And I think it's a huge mistake because slide decks are lecture notes. They're not teaching themselves, right? So for me, when I start thinking about what am I going to teach in my class, the first thing is what is going to be the activity the students are going to engage in. And slide decks are secondary. They can assist that activity, but they're not there to just to serve as a textbook that's projected on a wall.
That's right. Wow. What would I see when I walk into your classroom? What do I see going on?
So the way I try to teach my classes is via experiential learning. I try to teach as much as I can lab style, as in people are working with each other or working on a computer and they're trying to solve a problem. I come to class. I typically, what I do is I introduce a business problem, and in the main class that I teach, which is an optimization and simulation modeling class, what I do is I introduce some sort of something that the students need to solve, either that they need to optimize something or simulate something. So I tell them what the business story is, the context, and then I have them engage each other and figure out what's the right model. And I give them quite a bit of time to think about this. Usually something like 10, 12 minutes.
Wow.
To think about this as a pair. Or I might give 2 stretches of 6 minutes with like an interlude or something.
Right, nice.
I might break that up sometimes. But I give them a fairly long amount of time to think about this. And then I have them tell me what they think the solution is. And I try to do a little bit of like this case style discussion, as in, is this the right way? Is that the right way? And try to get to solutions of the problems. And when a student says the right way, I'll repeat what the right way the student said. Because it's very important, because this is another element that I think is very important in this kind of business school teaching, is a lot of repetition. To say the main points that you want to get across at least a few times.
I think I heard you say the other day that if you don't say the important points at least 3 times in a class, it's not going to stay with the students.
Yeah, my standard assumption is that everything I say makes it to half the students. So like there's an error rate of 50%. So if I say once, half of them will get it. If I say twice, maybe 75% and so on. So I try to say all the really important things like 3 times in 3 slightly different ways to make sure that it reaches most of the class.
Can you give me some of the highlights of bad teaching that you tried to demonstrate?
Sure. That was quite a challenge you threw at me. So to give a little bit of context, you asked me to give a workshop to PhD students who are going to teach a class for the first time. And you asked me to show them what bad teaching was like and what good teaching was like. And I tried to do like really bad teaching, and I prepared a really ugly slide. But the key point was I came in, I didn't give any context on what I was going to do. I started doing like, here's a mathematical model we're going to build. And I put lots of ugly equations and very dense slides on the board. And I just read very quickly through the materials. Like, wow, just looking at the screen, not looking at the students at all. And in the end, just like speed reading everything in the end, just saying, all right, any questions? All right, no questions, we're done. Not giving anybody any time to engage the material, no chances to really think through what I was saying. So one mistake that I notice rookie people doing is they say questions, and then they wait 2 seconds, and there are no hands up, and they move on, right? Or they wait 1 second, and that's not right? So, because people, when you ask them questions, people take some time to think about, do I have questions? What are the issues that I don't understand? So one thing that I force myself in a classroom is if there's no hands going up, and I think there should be hands going up, I stay quiet uncomfortably long until a hand goes up. or I push them. I think there are questions. You guys are not telling me. And I force them to ask me questions.
Right.
And the other thing I try to do is try to make them as comfortable as I can with asking questions. Like, if they ask me a question, I try to point out what is the correct part of the thinking in the thing they're saying as much as I can.
Interesting.
Even if they say something wrong, I try to say, I don't agree with that statement, but I agree with that part of the statement. So I try to say, like, I understand where you're trying to go, but let me course correct you. Or I ask a student to help me course correct.
Do you know your students' names?
I try to learn them. But when I had smaller classes in the beginning, I would learn them all in the first day.
Wow.
Now it takes me a little longer because I'm often teaching 3 classes at the same time, and the classes are bigger. So I make a point of making sure that they all have name tags up.
Oh, they do. So you
I have them print out name tags. So because that also helps me learn the names, right? So it's way easier to learn the names in a classroom context than try to memorize them before coming to class.
Right. Attendance in your class is important.
Yes. Yeah, participation is important. I give points for participation.
You do.
I think it's hard to, like, if you think about a video versus a classroom environment.
Right.
They might look the same because you're just watching somebody talk, but they're not the same at all because
Wow.
in a classroom, I force you to turn off your phone, to stop checking Gmail, and to sit down and discuss a problem with somebody for 10 minutes. So I force a sort of like deep engagement with somebody else, and then you engage with me and with the rest of the class. So the level of focus and attention that you as a student you can put in a classroom environment is so much greater.
Right. What indication do you have that your students' ways of thinking are shifting? How do you know that?
I mean, the basic way is seeing if they can transfer the material from, like, I'll give them a problem and I'll help guide them on that problem, and then I'll give them something different, and I see if they can transfer the same skills to something else.
And that's something else that's key.
Yeah. It has to be
it's not replicating.
No, it has to be a relatively different problem, but you can use the same techniques. For example, in my class, one of the things I love doing is teach a technique in a context, let's say, a manufacturing management problem, a production planning problem. And then the next class, what I do is say, let's use exactly those techniques to solve a finance problem.
Wow.
And the question
Perfect.
is like, can you use the same principles of modeling to model this problem here on like how to finance a project?
Wow.
And it takes work to transfer that knowledge, but I spend the whole class thinking about the exact same ideas, different contexts. And I think
that's just what you said. That's that focused, deep learning. That's a huge shift. I mean, to move the skills and the mental models to another context.
Yeah.
And it seems really important, though.
Yeah, the way I think of myself is a little bit like a personal trainer. Is that you come to my class to exercise, and I start off easy. The first week is not very hard, but by the second week it starts picking up, and by third week you need to be fairly confident in what you learn in second week so you can do well in third week, and so on. So it's kind of like every week I push you a little harder, and I've had students who told me the biggest mistake they made in my class was look ahead in the course pack like 6 weeks ahead and see, man, no way I can solve this problem. This sounds too hard.
Right.
But
in the personal training model, do we have to do a little practice outside of class as well?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 hours a week, 2.5 hours a week is not enough to learn something, right?
Right.
So 2.5 hours a week is enough time for me to give you guidance, but then I also give them practice problems every week and homeworks and everything. What are the key points? So when I think about I want to teach a topic, the first thing I don't do is I don't do a slide deck. I think about what the activity it is. And then if I'm going to do a slide deck, it's going to be supporting that activity. And I think about not what I'm doing for that an hour 15 of class, but I think about what my students are doing for that hour 15 of class. And what I'm doing is secondary. And if I don't have anything to do, that's fine. I can walk around the room and help them out.
Right.
But the important thing is that they are fully engaged for the full time. And one thing I learned actually from the STEP Lab, from the group here at Stern that teaches teaching, is try to get them always to work in groups. I used to, in the beginning, when I started teaching, I would make them work by themselves. And when I made them work by themselves, I would never see the mistakes they were making. I wouldn't hear their thinking. And they wouldn't be able to help each other out.
Wow.
So that was a piece of advice that I got early in my teaching career that I found incredibly helpful, which was like, make sure there's always like, students are not just thinking internally, but thinking out loud.
Right.
So that other people can help them, both other students and myself.
And also what's interesting is that the students' understanding of the material might actually be more helpful coming from a student to student rather than from you, because I mean, you're the expert and your explanation may be different. So a student helping a student seems to make a lot of sense.
Oh, I've seen this a number of times. It's a student asks me a question, and if I would try to answer, they wouldn't understand. But if another student tries to answer, they would understand their answer. So it's one of the reasons when a student asks me a question, I try to see if I can find another student to answer that question. And then I always repeat the student's answer if it's right.
Yeah.
Because there's always some error rate, some probability that the thing will get through. So if multiple people say the same thing, more likely that the ideas will...
Yeah.
will get in.
2 more review tips for us, or approaches to teaching, or you've given us the slide deck and the importance of focusing on activities. 2 more pieces of advice. I hate to let you go.
Okay, so one more thing that I think is important is think about the narrative of the class. So a class, often people think about, you got to think about both the narrative within the lectures and the narrative throughout the lectures. And I keep coming back to those. So when I'm doing a lecture, I know what my punchlines of the lecture are, 1 or 2 or 3 punchlines, and I try to think about how and when I'm going to deliver them. And I try to do this also in the overall theme of my course, as in, why did we think about models of this kind in the beginning of the course? Why are we thinking about models of this kind now? And I keep coming back, what were the advantages of the model that we did in the beginning? What are the advantages now? What are the disadvantages? How do you think about trade-offs? As in, have both a storyline and punchlines both within lectures and within the course. So that students, when they say, what is that course about? They can tell you, like, what are the punchlines of the course. So that's, that I think is very important for them to feel good at the end, that they've learned, like, something coherent that makes sense.
That's so helpful.
Sure.
Ilan, it's a pleasure. I really appreciate your taking the time to share your insights. I think they'll be helpful for a lot of folks. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you again for inviting me.
Continued success, okay?
Thank you
so much.
Thank you,
Great.
Carol.